This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The stories, theories, and claims presented are based on publicly available sources, eyewitness accounts, and whistleblower testimony. We do not claim all content to be factual. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and form their own opinions. Viewer discretion is advised. Deep in the heart of North Carolina's wilderness lies a phenomenon that has fascinated, puzzled, and even terrified people for centuries. The Brown Mountain Lights, an ethereal display of glowing orbs that dance and flicker above the mountain's misty peaks. For over 800 years, these otherworldly lights have been reported dancing above Brown Mountain in the Pisgah National Forest. The first documented sightings came from the Cherokee tribe. They told stories of ghostly lights that emerged after fierce battles, which they believed were the spirits of the fallen warriors. As the legend goes, during the Revolutionary War, a British patrol surprised a group of Cherokee warriors in the valley below Brown Mountain. A fierce battle ensued, and when the dust settled, the ground was stained with the blood of fallen warriors on both sides. That night, the spirits of the dead were said to have risen and danced on the mountain in a macabre celebration of the bloodshed. In more recent times, the Brown Mountain Lights have been described by travelers passing through the area as strange flickering lights moving silently through the night. Hikers and campers in the Pisgah National Forest have reported seeing these mysterious lights hovering for minutes at a time, darting quickly across the sky or pulsating as if alive. The lights are typically white, yellow, or reddish in color and appear to rise from the ground, drift through the air, and sometimes split apart or vanish without a trace. One can only imagine the surprise and wonder of those who, while camping in the forest, suddenly find themselves gazing upon this mesmerizing spectacle. In the early 20th century, the U.S. Geological Survey investigated the Brown Mountain Lights in an attempt to find a natural cause for the phenomenon. Some speculated that swamp gas rising from the nearby Green River might be to blame, while others suggested that the lights were simply reflections of headlights from cars traveling along the valley floor. However, these theories failed to hold up, and the mystery only deepened. Today, the Brown Mountain Lights continue to baffle experts and thrill-seekers alike, with each new sighting adding another layer to this centuries-old enigma. If you're ever in the area and witness this spectacle for yourself, you'll understand why. The Brown Mountain Lights have captured the imaginations of so many. Have you ever seen anything like this? Let me know in the comments below. Tom, a seasoned hunter who knew these woods like the back of his hand, hunted all his life in these mountains. For him, the mountains held no secrets. He'd tracked countless deer through these very same trees, and his knowledge of the wilderness was unmatched. So when he spoke of what he saw one fall evening near Brown Mountain, people listened. It was just another day in the woods for Tom. The crisp air, the golden hues of the falling leaves made for a perfect hunting trip. As dusk began to settle over the mountain, Tom found his ideal spot, nestled in a small clearing. With his rifle in hand, he settled down, blending into the darkening landscape. And then the silence hit him. In the stillness of the forest, Tom noticed an absence of the usual sounds that accompanied dusk. The chorus of crickets, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals seeking shelter for the night. All was silent. The only sound was the soft whisper of the breeze through the leaves. That's when he saw it. Between the dark trees, something appeared, glowing softly. At first, it was just a faint glimmer, but it quickly grew brighter, revealing itself to be a bright orb of light. The light was white, yet it had a strange blue tint, like the glow of a distant campfire. Slowly it moved closer, floating past the trees, weaving effortlessly through the branches. Tom watched, mesmerized and confused. At first, he thought it was another hunter with a lantern. But as it drew nearer, he realized it was no man-made light. The light stopped about 100 yards from where Tom sat. And for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat and the soft glow all around him. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, another light emerged from between the trees. This one was smaller, dimmer, and it seemed to dance around the first light. Then a third light appeared, and together they began to circle him, moving slowly, silently. Fear began to grip Tom's heart. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. His instincts took over. He raised his rifle, aiming instinctively at the light. But as he looked through the scope, all he saw was a blurry, indistinct shape. It was as if the lights were winking in and out of existence. He watched in disbelief as the lights continued their eerie circle around him, their glow casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach out like grasping claws. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the lights began to rise. Slowly, they ascended, one by one, until they were nothing but tiny pinpricks of light against the darkening sky. Then they vanished, disappearing beyond the ridge. Tom sat there for a long time, his rifle still raised, his heart pounding in his chest. When he finally lowered the gun, his hands were shaking. He didn't wait to see if the lights would return, turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy and his eyes darting from side to side. As he made his way through the trees, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, and the sound of his own breathing echoed in his ears like a death knell. When he finally reached his truck and got in, he was shaking. Eventually, he told his friends about the lights, but many just laughed it off, attributing it to fatigue or a vivid imagination. But Tom knew what he had seen. From that night on, Tom steered clear of Brown Mountain, and whenever he heard others talking about hiking or camping there, he would warn them of the watchers of the forest. Whether they believed him or not didn't matter. He knew what he had seen, and he knew that some places are best left undisturbed. And so the tale is passed down, a reminder that sometimes the things we see in the darkness are best left unexplained. In the summer of 1998, a young couple from Charlotte, North Carolina, named Sarah and Jake, decided to camp near Brown Mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains, an area known for its stunning natural beauty and hiking trails. But there was something else the mountain was also known for. Strange, mysterious lights that had been spotted by locals for years. These weren't your typical fireflies or even distant car headlights. These lights were described as moving orbs of light that seemed to dance around the mountain and possessed an intelligence of some sort. Some witnesses claimed these lights even followed them home. Now, Sarah and Jake weren't exactly sure what to make of these stories, but they were more curious than scared. So they packed up their camping gear and headed out to the mountain. Armed with nothing but a camera and binoculars, they pitched their tent at an overlook near the valley floor, a popular spot for stargazers and photographers due to its expansive view of the mountains and valleys below. As night fell and the stars blanketed the sky, they settled in to wait. The hours ticked by, and just as they started to think maybe it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, just past midnight, their patience paid off. A single bright orb rose slowly from the valley floor. At first it glowed softly, but then it began to intensify, becoming a brilliant white light that was impossible to ignore. Excited, Jake grabbed the camera while Sarah peered through the binoculars. The light began to rise slowly. It hovered there for a moment like it was searching for something, then dipped low once more and disappeared from view. They waited, watching, hoping for it to reappear. And when it did, it was joined by another light, then another. Suddenly, there were 3 distinct lights moving in perfect harmony, almost as if they were communicating with each other. For a few moments, they watched as these lights danced around the mountainside, moving in ways that no earthly object could. Then the unthinkable happened. One of the lights, the brightest one, began to move directly toward them. At first it was slow, but then it started to pick up the pace, gliding effortlessly over the treetops. It was coming straight for them. In a panic, Jake snapped photo after photo, hoping to capture at least one good image of the strange occurrence. But it seemed as though the camera didn't want to cooperate. Each picture came out dark and blurry, as if the camera itself was frightened. The closer the light came, the more uneasy they felt. There was a strange static in the air, and the buzzing in their ears grew louder. Then the light was upon them. It was so bright that they had to shield their eyes, and the humming filled their heads, making it difficult to think. They were frozen with fear, unable to move or speak. It was then that Jake and Sarah decided they had waited long enough. They quickly gathered up their things and fled, practically running for their car. As they sped down the winding mountain road, they could see the 3 lights following them, keeping pace easily. The orbs weaved in and out of the trees, never touching a single branch as they glided along. It wasn't until they reached the main highway that the lights finally disappeared, melting away into the darkness, leaving Sarah and Jake shaken and alone. When they got home, they shared their experience online, adding to the growing number of similar reports that had been circulating for years. Stories of mysterious lights that seemed to possess intelligence, moving in patterns that defied explanation and even following people home. While some dismissed these accounts as mere campfire tales, others came forward with their own experiences, creating a web of mystery and intrigue around Brown Mountain. Their story, like so many before them, became part of the lore. A testament to the strange and unexplained that some say still dances among the trees on Brown Mountain. Have you, or anyone you know, ever experienced anything like this? Let me know in the comments below. David Pearson was an experienced hiker. He loved nothing more than to get away from it all and explore the great outdoors. So when he heard about the Brown Mountain lights, a phenomenon that had been baffling people for years, he didn't believe the hype. In fact, he was planning a solo hike in the area and was determined to prove once and for all that there was nothing to fear. David decided to hike to the top of Brown Mountain, a rugged peak in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. He packed his gear, grabbed his trusty hiking poles, and hit the trail. The hike was tough. The weather was unpredictable, the terrain was rough, but David was determined to make it to the top. He wanted to camp overnight on the eastern side of the mountain, far from the prying eyes of the public. As evening approached, the sky became overcast and a thick fog rolled in. Before long, David realized that he was in trouble. Trail markers were becoming harder and harder to spot. When he stopped to catch his breath, he knew he was lost. With no cell service in the area, David was in for a long night, but he remained calm. He found a spot to set up his tent and made a small fire to keep him warm. Then he settled in and waited for morning to come. But as night fell, the temperature dropped and the wind picked up. David started to feel uneasy. He huddled deeper into his sleeping bag and tried to ignore the howling wind. That's when he saw it. In the distance, there was a soft glow, like a lantern floating along the trail. At first he called out, but there was no reply. The light grew brighter and closer, and as it approached, David could see that it wasn't a person at all. It was a strange, glowing orb that seemed to be floating just above the ground. What made it even stranger was that it wasn't making any sound. There were no footsteps or voices, just the sound of the wind and the crackling fire. Suddenly, the light split into two smaller lights, and they began to weave between the trees. They moved with such precision that it was clear they weren't being controlled by anyone. They just floated around David's campsite, casting an eerie glow on the surrounding trees. David was mesmerized and terrified at the same time. He couldn't take his eyes off the lights as they danced around him. But as they drew nearer, he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. His compass needle spun wildly, and his watch, which had been working perfectly fine, suddenly stopped working altogether. That's when David decided he'd had enough. He packed up his things as quickly as he could and started to make his way down the mountain. He stumbled through the darkness, following what he thought was the right path. But the fog was thick and the trees were tall, and he couldn't be sure if he was headed in the right direction or not. All he knew was that he wanted to get away from those lights. After what felt like hours, David stumbled onto a service road. He had no idea how long he'd been walking or how far he'd traveled, but he was relieved to be away from the strange lights. When he looked back, they were gone. As quickly as they had appeared, they vanished into the mist. David continued down the mountain, and at dawn he finally reached the car. He was exhausted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He drove home, still shaken by his experience. From that day forward, David never hiked alone again. He also never dismissed the legend of the Brown Mountain lights. He knew what he had seen that night, and he knew that there were some things in this world that we simply can't explain. One moonless summer night, a seasoned hiker named Caleb Turner decided to brave the trail near Brown Mountain alone. He was no stranger to the area, having hiked these woods countless times. But tonight was different. The air was thick with humidity, and the usual symphony of crickets and tree frogs was replaced by an unsettling silence. Caleb had always been a skeptic. When it came to ghost stories and strange light tales, he'd brush them off as tricks of the mind or exaggerated local lore. But tonight, he wanted nothing more than to lose himself in the solitude of the wilderness under the star-studded sky. He adjusted his backpack, its weight a comforting familiarity against his shoulders, and set off down the trail. For about 2 hours, the only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the gravel path and the whisper of the wind through the leaves. The towering trees on either side of him were like old, gnarled giants, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Just as he began to feel the solitude pressing in on him a little too closely, he reached a clearing. It was a perfect spot, a flat expanse of land with a fire pit ringed by smooth, flat stones. And from here, he had a clear view of the mountain's dark silhouette against the inky black canvas of the night sky. He unshouldered his pack, settling in for what promised to be a night of peaceful solitude. As he poured water from his bottle, a soft bluish orb suddenly appeared above the trees. At first, he thought it was a flashlight, a careless camper who'd left their light unattended. But then the orb floated silently between the tree trunks, seeming to drift effortlessly in midair. It paused for a moment, and then it darted up, high above the canopy of the trees, disappearing from sight. Caleb sat frozen in place, his breath catching in his throat, as disbelief and a prickle of fear crept up his spine. A low whistle echoed through the clearing, and Caleb's gaze snapped to the spot where the light had vanished. It reappeared, hovering no more than 50 feet from where he sat. The light pulsed gently, casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered around him. Caleb could feel its intense glow, even though he kept his eyes averted, unable to tear them away from the spectacle before him. He wanted to scream, to run, but terror had frozen him in place. The light continued to pulse, and after what felt like an eternity, it shot toward the ridge and vanished into the night. Only then did the sound of rushing water reach Caleb's ears, snapping him out of his stupor. He scrambled to his feet and broke into a run, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath echoing in his ears with every step. The forest floor, which had seemed so familiar just moments before, now looked alien and menacing in the darkness. Each snap of a twig, each rustle of leaves sounded like a threat, each shadow seemed to writhe and twist into menacing shapes. When he finally reached his car, his hands trembled as he fumbled for his keys. He backed out of the parking spot and turned onto the main road, his foot pressing hard on the accelerator. The drive home was a blur. All Caleb could think about was the eerie blue light and the sudden, inexplicable fear it had instilled in him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had been watching him, studying him from just beyond his sight. When he recounted his experience later, he admitted that what he'd seen that night had shattered his skepticism. He couldn't explain what he'd witnessed, and he understood now why generations of locals spoke of the lights with a mixture of awe and fear. Caleb's encounter serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain, and that the darkest corners of our world may hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. What would you do in this situation? As our journey through the legends and eyewitness accounts of the Brown Mountain Lights comes to a close, one thing remains certain: this mystery is far from over. For over a century, countless people from all walks of life have witnessed the strange glowing orbs that hover, dart, and flicker across the North Carolina mountains. Scientists have offered explanations from swamp gas to headlights, but none have fully accounted for the consistency, intelligence, and eerie patterns of these lights. Locals continue to report sightings. Hikers stumble upon unexplainable activity, and paranormal researchers believe Brown Mountain may be a portal, sacred energy site, or even a location of interdimensional contact. Despite advances in technology, the lights remain just out of reach, defying all attempts to be fully understood. So we ask again, are these natural anomalies or messages from something beyond? The truth may be hidden deep within the foggy ridges and silent forests of Brown Mountain, waiting for those brave enough to keep searching. But one thing is clear: those lights are still watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and remember, don't look up.